start off the final quarter of the show with an innocuous little one-shot, the reservoir. The land of pyramids is in desperate need of new methods of power generation, and so King Alexander, no relation to the one from Daventry, has commissioned Hannibal and Rockadil to build a hydroelectric dam. However, this would lead to the pyramids being flooded, and so Cleo begs Professor Ramses to come and change the king's mind. They ultimately decide to have Professor Paljas design a much more environmentally friendly solar power plant, which of course our dastardly duo isn't happy with, so they hire Dolf to steal the plans from Paljas. Dolf goes in, gets caught by Alfred, and a merry slapstick-filled chase ensues. Seriously, if this show were nothing but Alfred and Dolf chasing each other around like Tom and Jerry, I'd still watch it. But their chase comes to an abrupt stop as they're left dangling from a drainpipe.
Hou nou toch eens op met dat heidense kabaal! Wat voeren jullie tweeën hier uit?
Goedenavond. Ja, we zullen stil zijn, maar wilt u alstublieft het raam weer heel voorzichtig dicht doen?
Je bent niet goed bij je kraaienkop!
Unfortunately, Alfred fails to get the plans back, forcing Paljas to redo the designs entirely overnight, but they get to present their plan for the solar plant the next morning anyway, and all is well, rendering the whole point kinda moot. Oh, and Alexander and Cleo are implied to have a thing together. That's kinda cute, I guess. Yeah, not a very impressive start to the series end, but what are you gonna do? Next, things heat up with the volcano. Alfred and Paljas are out on an expedition into space, exploring an alien junkyard full of discarded war machines, when one of them proves to still have a bit of life left in it and chases them around. But as they make their getaway, the poor thing forlornly reaches out towards them, as if it simply didn't want to be alone.
Misschien wilde die wel met ons mee.
Hoe kom je daar nou zo opeens bij, Alfred?
Ik heb toch eigenlijk wel medelijden met hem.
Kom nou, het is maar een robot.
Ja, dat weet ik, maar hij zit daar toch maar helemaal alleen op die eenzame planeet en dat is niet leuk.
Maak je geen zorgen, Alfred. Robots hebben geen gevoel.
Oh really? That's not what your colleague Hannibal said earlier.
Die robots van tegenwoordig hebben ook gevoelens, vertelde Hannibal me.
Robots hebben ook nooit een vrije dag, hè?
Nou, de professor zegt dat dat wel kan.
But never mind all that, because it has absolutely no bearing on what comes next. On a distant island, a dead volcano has suddenly sprung back to life again and is frequently spewing out a spectacular display of fire, but oddly enough no smoke or lava, and so has become a popular tourist attraction. As you might expect, Paljas wants to have a closer look and see what might be causing it, and Alfred goes along as always, traveling once again with, who else? Captain Stoppel. After a long and arduous journey, they reach the rim of the volcano, but as they stand in awe of the inferno before them, Alfred proves to be a bit of a klutz as he trips right over the edge and falls in. But fortunately for him, what awaits him below is not a searing pit of lava, but instead a ginormous dragon from outer space whose tail got caught underneath a giant boulder. Oh good, I don't even have to pull out the end credits this time. In the next episode, The Dragon, Alfred manages to climb his way out of the pit and inform everyone of what is down there, prompting them to launch a rescue operation to get the dragon out of its awkward position and haul it to safety. But Rockadil learns of the dragon while watching the news, and figures it'd make a perfect attraction for his new theme park in Broad Reedland. Seems that debacle with Alfred's parents hasn't stopped him from franchising, so he again hires Dolf to go and do his dirty work and buy the dragon from his legal owner, the Maharaja of the island, and after some aggressive negotiating, Dolf then hijacks the rescue attempt and steals the dragon away by helicopter. This aggravates Alfred so badly that he actually says a swear word.
De draak was het eigendom van Nikilo Kopoen, omdat hij op zijn land gevonden is. En ik heb de draak van hem gekocht, dus heb ik deze keer niets onwettigs gedaan.
Domme!
Nou, Alfred, dat mag je niet zeggen. Als je de draak nog een keer wilt zien, moet je gewoon naar het amusementspark gaan. Ik weet zeker dat je je daar zult amuseren. Tabé!
Domme!
The poor dragon doesn't seem to enjoy being put on display in a gilded cage, however, so Paljas and Alfred come up with a plan to free it and send it home. Thus, Paljas pulls out his old whale translator and reconfigures it to dragon language, because extraterrestrial linguistics are just that simple when you're a talented inventor like Paljas. After successfully communicating with the poor beast to learn where it came from, Alfred and Paljas then escort some of its buddies to Earth, completely off-screen I might add, and they break out their compadre and fly back home. Hope Rockadil took out insurance on that thing, but now we get political with Great Waterland gets a president. Alfred receives a summons from the king, who wants to discuss a matter of urgent importance with him. So what might this be? Well, surely the title didn't give that away or anything.
Die storm gaat vast keer.
Vanavond om 11 uur is het weer vloed. Daar maak ik me zorgen over.
En wat hoort een koning in zo'n geval te doen? Hoort hij hier te zitten en zich zorgen te maken? Nee, een koning hoort eerst alles te doen wat hij kan. Maar ik zit altijd maar niets te doen. Ik ben volledig onbekwaam.
Majesteit.
Ik zit erover na te denken om af te treden, Alfred.
Majesteit!
Aw, he's so humble. His idea is to turn Great Waterland into a constitutional monarchy, with himself as a figurehead, while the real political power is held by a president, elected democratically by the people. When the king suggests that Alfred himself might run for the presidency, he humbly declines, but suggests that Ollie might make a good candidate. But of course the elections are a prime opportunity for Dolf to take center stage again, as he also becomes a presidential candidate, when he should probably be arrested on sight for, you know, that whole business with the Crows party before. But no, that's all water under the bridge apparently, as he claims to have reformed and thus wants to be elected the democratic way, fair and square. Plus, you know, there's still a lot of his former party members rounding about, so that means he instantly has a lot of support. But it's not enough to win over the majority, so Dolf instantly starts scheming to turn popular opinion in his favor, even if it means getting his hands dirty.
De plotselinge dood van Ollie?
Hé, Dolf, je gaat me toch niet vertellen dat...
Wat?
Dat je Ollie...
Ollie?
gaat vermoorden? Maar Dolf...
Als het erop aankomt, zou ik inderdaad tot alles in staat zijn. Zelfs in staat tot een moord. Onthoud dat, Wannes.
Oh, I love it when he gets nasty like this. The scheme unfolds in the next episode, The Flood. As Great Waterland is bombarded with heavy rainstorms, Dolf has Wannes hire some foreigners to sabotage a dike, a structure meant to block water around the coastline, which is a common feature in the Netherlands, and cause a massive flood. Then Dolf makes a public announcement where he selflessly offers his support by using the building materials currently in his possession and gathering whatever manpower he can to stop the disaster. Alfred, of course, immediately suspects foul play, but needs evidence to support his claims. So it's lucky that Lispel saw the whole thing happen, who then goes to confront Dolf about it for some good old-fashioned blackmail.
Betaal me nu maar, dan ben je van me af, hè? Hé, wat is dat nou?
Jij gaat eraan.
Nee, niet schieten. Je hoeft niet te betalen.
Holy... What the... Did Dolf just straight up murder Lispel? I gotta admit, that was actually kind of awesome. Sure didn't expect a kids show like this to incorporate a scene straight out of a gangster flick. But this is not the end for Lispel, as he just got off with a few scrapes, and as he probably realizes there's nothing to gain from all this, he goes to Alfred and tattles everything he knows to him. Realizing that Wannes is the key figure in all this, Alfred zealously runs around town looking for him, but he seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth. Confronting Dolf about it is equally fruitless, though I do love Alfred's angry Shadow the Hedgehog face here. But the situation more or less resolves itself as Wannes instead comes to Alfred, plagued by his guilty conscience as his actions led to several dozen animals getting injured in the flood, and he's come to realize just what would happen to the country if Dolf were to take charge. So he turns himself in to the police and the jig is up as Dolf beats a heated retreat to avoid questioning. Ollie is thus elected into office to probably usher in a new age for LGBT animals everywhere, leaving the king to finally realize his lifelong dream of becoming a space pirate. And now, I gotta steel myself for this next three-parter because we're in for some genuine lunacy here. And that's not a statement made lightly, considering what has come before. We begin with The Land of Two, where Alfred and Paljas take a trip to the titular country, so named for the massive divide, both geographically and politically, between its northern and southern halves. Recently, a mysterious virus dubbed Mozons has become epidemic among the poverty-stricken people of the south and is causing the infected to rapidly age. Paljas and Alfred meet Millier, the mayor of a town in the south and part-time fortune teller, as Paljas intends to do research in the hopes of finding a cure. They're shown around the town, which is in a sorry state, and the tour ends as Alfred gets to look at the virus itself.
Waar komen die vandaan?
So, it's all pretty serious stuff, but this is where it starts getting weird. Millier tells the two that he has had prophetic dreams as of late, which he believes hold the key to finding a cure for the Mozons virus. And what, pray tell, might this be?
De clown die woont op de maan.
A clown on the moon. Of course. Well, I did say there'd be lunacy, didn't I? So in the next episode, Piero, it is decided that, while Paljas stays to research a cure on his own, Alfred and Henk will take his flying windmill to the moon to find this alleged clown. It's not much of a plan, but hey, it's the best one they've got. Also, Alfred learned to pilot the windmill now. Guess he has to do something to keep himself busy with no job and all. And wouldn't you know it, after several days of searching, they do run into the guy happily playing his violin out in the cold, hard vacuum. Because physics are for nerds. The clown explains that he saw the Mozon's virus land on Earth a while ago, but as he was too old and feeble to stop them, he instead used the powers of his magical violin to send a message through Millier's dreams. Now that Alfred is here, the clown passes his violin on to him along with the melody that can make oneself or the Mozons vanish into nothingness. Alfred does get the hang of it in the end, but Paljas feels that the best way to ensure the virus stays gone for good is to eliminate the gulf between the rich and the poor that allowed the virus to spread so quickly in the first place, and so they go to see the king of the Land of Two. Unfortunately, Alfred's castle-busting skills prove insufficient to get him past the guards at the castle this time, so instead he simply uses the violin to teleport himself inside. Good thing it also seems to have a reappear function. Inside, Alfred finds the king and his council, the 12 wise men, literally tied up in the all-important task of untangling the king's beard. But Alfred quickly sorts out the problem and further demonstrates the violin's catch-all power by using it to make the knots in the king's beard vanish. He offers his help to eradicate the Mozon's virus, but in exchange, demands that the North immediately hands over half of its wealth to the South, which frankly is an outrageous demand to make even if the king were willing to cooperate. Alfred's heart is in the right place, sure, but he clearly hasn't put a lot of thought into the logistics required for that sort of thing. Nevertheless, the king accepts Alfred's offer in the closing chapter of this trifecta. All's well that ends well, except he secretly already intends not to honor their agreement. Should have gotten that in writing, Alfred. In order to cure as many animals at once as possible, Alfred must now play his violin over the radio for 5 hours straight, which would be a Herculean effort for any experienced violinist, and even more so for an amateur like Alfred, but he bravely undertakes the task nonetheless. Now, as we're all about to watch this unfold, allow me for a moment to illustrate exactly what we're looking at here. A yellow duck in a red scarf is attempting to cure an entire country suffering from a virus from outer space that kills you through rapid aging, and said duck is doing so by playing a tune on a magical violin that he got from a clown who lives on the moon. I have honestly never touched any sort of drugs in my entire life, but this might be the best darn substitute I've ever seen this side of Adventure Time. But in all seriousness, this scene is actually pretty touching, to see all of these poor, hope-ridden animals be restored to life by the sound of Alfred's music, who's doing his darndest to help the helpless. As expected, the performance takes its toll on Alfred, but is nevertheless a resounding success as the people of the Land of Two rejoice at having overcome the disease at last. And then Alfred is rewarded for his efforts with a one-way trip to the nearest jail cell. Apparently it's a common thing for royals to think you can just stuff your problems away in a prison and hope they'll go away. Except they completely neglected to take Alfred's violin away from him. But rather than simply teleporting himself out of this predicament, Alfred does this. He uses the violin to lead every single child in the country out into the streets in the middle of the night and then sends them off to Grob knows where on discs of light. Pied Piper of Hamelin, eat your heart out. But in the name of all that is good and sacred in this world, Alfred, did you ever stop to consider the consequences of your actions involving all of these innocents just to get back at the king? Just picture the scenario of the next morning as hundreds, if not thousands, of mothers and fathers wake up everywhere to find that their precious children have all but literally vanished into thin air? Can you imagine the widespread panic that would ensue as a result? You really want all that on your conscience? Do you even care? Hell, just look at Alfred the next morning, looking all smug at what he's done. and he's supposed to be the good guy in all of this. Regardless of Alfred's questionable moral code, the king is persuaded to begin public talks with Millier and thus share the wealth of the north with the south as promised. And Alfred brings the children back from whatever demon realm he sent them off to. And so the day is saved. Yay? After all that insanity, it's completely understandable that one would want to take a little breather, so why not relax with a game of golf? In this slapstick-heavy tale, Professor Polyos makes a business arrangement to sell the plans for his new experimental submarine to a Mr. Ford from Japan. But since it's apparently tradition there to play golf before signing off on a deal like that, the professor has to get in some practice before his trip. Which doesn't go well, but at least Alfred gets some decent schadenfreude out of it. Plus he's happy that he won't have to come along with the professor on another wild duck chase for a change. A sentiment sweetly shared by Winnie. And then Polyos calls to tell that he broke his arm practicing, and so Alfred will have to practice and eventually play in his place. Karma's a drag. So after some wacky training sessions, the day finally comes and we meet Polyos' business partner. Oh boy. How is it possible for overseas Asian animators to make their own characters look like Mickey Rooney? Anyway, Polyos and Mr. Ford end up not seeing eye to eye over what to name the submarine, so they stake the game on it, putting all the pressure on poor Alfred's shoulders. Hijinks ensue as Ford proves to be not entirely the expert he was hyped up as, and Alfred eventually wins through sheer dumb luck. After that, we move on to the colorful next episode, The Rainbow, where Alfred, Hank, and Winnie are gazing in awe at the eponymous natural display when Picky comes falling from the sky, followed by Professor Polyos. And wouldn't you know it, he's once again here to drag Alfred along to chase an old legend, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, which Polyos' colleague Dr. Livingstone, I know, just saying it like it is, believes truly exists. And coming along with them are Hank and Picky. Oh, goody. I can't imagine this going badly at all. So the gang travels deep into the jungles of the Arlon continent with Dr. Livingstone and his native assistant in tow, where they face mischievous serpents, vultures, leather-clad primates, and a river monster that looks like an overgrown eggplant. I'm far past the point where this would even surprise me anymore. Of course, the old cliché dictates that they then have to go down a waterfall and end up in the clutches of a cannibal tribe, who decide to have Alfred for dinner. Fortunately, Alfred is saved from this fate in the next episode, The Casino, where the guardian of the pot of gold, Nora, appears and orders the natives to let him go. After Alfred takes some time to recover from being boiled alive, Nora's all too happy to show everybody what they've been searching for, but warns that if the pot were ever removed from its resting place, it would cause all colors in the world to fade away. Again, physics are for nerds. This thing's apparently always been here and given the world its color. Understandably, Picky doesn't really care about that as he can barely contain his glee at the sight of this shiny, shiny trinket. So it should surprise absolutely nobody that when the gang goes to sleep, they wake up the next morning all perfectly satisfied with what they found and go home again without incident. Not! By the time everybody wakes up, Picky and the pot of gold have both disappeared without a trace. And don't anybody dare say that Picky was at fault here. You all knew dang well this was going to happen if you brought him along. But as Picky hightails it to the nearest airport, who would be waiting for him there but a familiar figure in a business suit?
Hello, Picky.
By the time the rest of the gang catches up with an overly emotional Picky back at the Great Waterland Airport, Dolf has already made off with the pod after their plane landed in Morena, a veritable wretched hive of scum and villainy. There, he offers part of the pot's contents to a local casino boss to pay off his substantial gambling debts. Because, you know, gambling is bad and all that. But just as he thinks he's getting off scot-free, Alfred and company make their presence known in an overly dramatic fashion, and so Dolf has no other recourse but to leg it as usual. And as Alfred chases after him, the others just let nature take its course because by now they realize it's universal law that Alfred always beats Dolf. So blah blah blah, Alfred gets the pot back, Dolf is left floating in the sea, and everything goes back to normal. Which is the only way things should ever be. So then we come to the penultimate episode, The Rainforest, which has probably the single most baffling title of any episode in the entire show for the sole reason that there is no rainforest anywhere to be found within. None! I guess you could glean that it sort of refers to the overall environmental theme of the episode, but that's a stretch. Anyway, Polyos preaches the dangers of acid rain to Alfred and wants to create a cleaner substitute for gasoline to save the environment. Something which obviously doesn't sit well with Rockadell and Hannibal because, you know, industry is bad and all that. So Hannibal goes to Marina to hire Dolf, yet again, to steal Polyos' plans. Hey, why change a winning strategy? But surprisingly, Dolf doesn't want to go, saying he's content to just live out his life in peace from now on. Guess that last kerfuffle with Alfred finally clued him into how the universe works as well. But he still has to pay the bills, not to mention his gambling debts, so he begrudgingly agrees to do the job. While Alfred is driving around a test track to see if Polyos' new fuel works, Dolf slips in unnoticed like an unnoticed slippery thing and swipes the formula, and then makes a quick getaway in his fancy set of wheels. So obviously a car chase ensues, where the two proceed to cause havoc all over Polder Town until Dolf happens to slip away thanks to an identical car that just happens to be around. And Alfred rather overzealously gives chase and runs the poor bastard off the road and drags him out of the smoking wreck before he even realizes he's got the wrong guy. Almighty ruler in heaven, Alfred, when will your reign of terror end? Was kidnapping children not enough for you? But Polyos picks up Dolph's trail in the flying windmill, leading them to Rockdale's mansion. So Alfred soon after bursts in together with Inspector Holmes and his special shirtless squad to arrest the whole bunch. Of course, they don't need a warrant or any kind of evidence or anything. Alfred's word is enough for the law because he's the protagonist, and thus Dolf is forced to surrender as the cops finally decide that maybe letting the former dictator go free is kind of a bad idea. So then, at long last, we come to the final episode of the show, Happily Ever After. For his crimes, Dolf is sentenced to a heavy prison sentence of 26 years. You'd expect the guy who turned the country into Nazi Germany to at least get life. But of course, a man as connected as he is doesn't plan on staying a jailbird very long, as he's already got a man on the inside to help him get out, Geppe. He's still charmingly loyal to his Mr. President after all this time, so the two of them conspire to stage a jailbreak. Meanwhile, Alfred gets in hot water with Winnie when he shows up late for a night at the theater, and she's so incensed that she drops him like airline luggage on the spot. Oh, for all this time you've been together, you were fine with Alfred going off on his own, but almighty ruler forbid he misses one teensy little date with you and you get all bent out of shape over that? Seriously, what happened to you, Winnie? This is just straight up character assassination. But while Alfred is stressing out over his broken heart, Dolf springs his cell and is free as a bird once more. Before he makes a run for the border, he apparently can't resist giving in to old habits and makes a quick stop by Professor Polius' laboratory. And Dolf has officially stopped messing around as he threatens to blow off poor Winnie's head when she happens to walk in and orders the professor to hand over his plans for his so-called mangling ray. Cripes, Polius, you're taking the mad scientist angle a bit far when you invent something called a mangling ray. So Dolf takes the plans, and as an added kick to Alfred's rear end, he also takes Winnie hostage to ensure safe passage across the border. Alfred's understandably shook up when he finds out what happened. So what does he do about it? He sits around and mopes. It's no wonder Dolf has suddenly become so competent when everybody else is acting like complete idiots. Pirating a TV broadcast, Dolf makes an outrageous ransom demand to Alfred personally and gives him false directions on where to go in the hopes that he'll be dumb enough to head into the middle of a scorching desert and die of thirst. Okay, forget what I said about Dolf's competence. He's yet again hoping the problem will just go away on its own. But Polios soon calls Alfred, and with his help, they manage to trace Dolf's broadcast to a small shack outside of Polder Town and get on their way to find him, while Dolf dreams a megalomaniacal dream.
Ik wil de baas zijn van de hele wereld.
Als je de baas kunt zijn van de tijd, is de hele wereld van jou.
Op deze wereld staat de tijd nu stil. Als ik dat zo laat, zal de aarde niet meer ronddraaien. En dat is het einde van deze wereld. En ik ben de enige die de aarde weer tot leven kan brengen. Met andere woorden, ik ben de meest geschikte persoon om de baas te zijn van de hele wereld. Want ik ben de baas van de tijd, dus ben ik ook de baas van de hele wereld.
Daar ben ik het niet mee eens.
Wie zegt dat? Die wil de vernietiging van de wereld.
Jij bent degene die deze wereld wil vernietigen.
Wie ben je? Hoe heet je?
Ik heet Alfred, Jodocus Kwak.
But even in Dolf's dreams, Alfred can't help but rise up to be the badass that he is. And quite appropriately, Dolf then wakes up to the one thing he did not want to see next to his bed. A steaming mad Alfred pointing a loaded gun at his face. Holy moly, this suddenly got awesome. Dolf crumbles like a house of cards at the sight of his mortal enemy coming a feather's breadth away from killing him in cold blood, and tells him where Winnie is. So Alfred runs off to save her, only to find she's already in the process of saving herself. Okay, points to her. Dolf, meanwhile, thinks he can make an easy getaway, but... We gotcha, you son of a blackbird. So with all that finally behind them, Alfred and Winnie are reunited and go home together.
Gefeliciteerd, Alfred. Van harte hoor. Heel leuk. Gefeliciteerd. Langzaam.
Perfect ending. So that's it then, the last quarter of the show. Unfortunately, a lot of the same problems I had with the previous part persist here. There's still an overall lack of continuity and character development, so none of the stories really feel like they matter and nobody is allowed to develop or learn anything. Winnie being the most glaring example of this, but I'll get to her in a minute because I didn't mention her a whole lot up until now. The messages conveyed by the episodes are still lacking in subtlety, but that's come to be expected by now. The plots overall are still strangely structured and have weak or odd resolutions, plus it feels like the writers were pretty much running out of ideas at this point, as several plots adhere to the basic Alfred and Polyos go on adventures structure that we've seen plenty of times before already, and nothing changes about the status quo either, aside from Ollie becoming president, which doesn't affect anything later down the line anyway. But despite all of that, the good parts still shine through. The life lessons still ring true, the slapstick comedy never fails to bring a smile to my face, especially in the golf episode, and the utter zaniness and unbridled creativity present in many of the stories in particular helps to keep things as enjoyable as always. My favorite among these last episodes is, of course, the Land of Two 3-parter, because, wow! That story is how you jump the shark in the best way possible. The fairly serious plot of disease, inequality, and poverty quickly turns hilariously ludicrous, and yet it's also surprisingly heartwarming and beautiful to witness in spite of its insanity. And the finale, despite having numerous problems, has some of my favorite moments in the entire series. Sure, Alfred mopes a lot, we never get to see Professor Polyus' mangling ray in action, and Winnie is absolutely insufferable up until the end, but Dolph's supreme nastiness and Alfred's final confrontation with his nemesis more than make up for it to me, along with the ending that feels like a celebration of everything that has led up to this point with all of the major characters showing up one final time. And really, a cartoon series of this age actually having an ending to begin with is noteworthy in itself. But speaking of Dolf, man, after his extended absence last time, he makes a comeback in a major way here. Sure, he never reaches the same heights as before, but when he's allowed to cut loose, he makes it clear that he's still one scary guy. Compared to iconic 80s cartoon villains like Megatron, Skeletor, or Shredder, he's not some blustering idiot who's thwarted by his own incompetence. His threats actually carry weight, as we can clearly see when he shoots Lispel in cold blood, and even shows he'd have no scruples getting rid of Ollie if it came down to it. To say nothing of when he gets hold of a freaking death ray and takes Winnie hostage just because he's feeling spiteful. Sure, he still gets his just desserts in the end, mostly because Alfred just has to thwart him somehow, but he still comes across as being a lot more competent and effective a lot of the time than most of his contemporaries. And this may be me reading too much into things, but I found it interesting how at one point he just seemingly gives up on villainy, as if he's finally learned that there's nothing to gain anymore from how he's acted in the past and how he always gets defeated in the end. It's brief, sure, but I still found it an interesting character moment for him, though the brief look we get into his subconscious shows he still desires to be on top despite all of that. But on the flip side, there's Winnie. Oh boy, Winnie. I had issues with her before, but she only gets worse here. Not only does she still not contribute anything to the stories overall, her dialogue makes her sound like a freaking airhead more than anything.
Jeetje Mina, wat zijn er veel dieren hier.
Ik ben blij dat iedereen hem leuk vindt.
We hebben de draak niet uit de kraten geholpen om hem hier in een kooi te zetten.
Maar hij is wel populair hier. De koning is vast verliefd op iemand. In de hoofdstad van een van die landen is hij 's nachts op straat gaan wandelen. En op de hoek van de straat zag hij toen een heel lief klein bloemenwinkeltje. En daar zag hij een heel mooi jong meisje tussen boeketten rozen. En hij werd ter plekke verliefd op haar. Zijn jullie echt van plan zoveel moeite te doen om iets te onderzoeken dat zo vaag is?
Tuurlijk.
Nou, ik niet hoor. Dat is echt belachelijk. Jullie zijn echt niet goed wijs. Jullie met z'n vieren zijn net een stelletje kleine kinderen.
And of course all that comes to a head in the finale when she unceremoniously dumps Alfred for a relatively mild infraction, and becoming a damsel in distress certainly doesn't do her character any favors either. And yet, I still can't stay mad at her because, let's face it, Alfred and her are still adorable when they're allowed to have their moments together. There's really nothing else for me to comment on in regards to the end of the series, but suffice it to say, it's fine for what it is, though it still could have been better. So, now that we've covered all the episodes, how does this series hold up overall? Surprisingly well, actually. Simply put, this show is a rare treat, being an 80s cartoon not based on $1 million franchise or made to sell toys or anything like that. Instead, it actually has heart, as it tries to tell its own story and convey a valuable message at the same time, while never losing sight of trying to entertain its audience with some very enjoyable and creative tales. And on top of that, it takes its audience seriously. It doesn't dumb things down or sugarcoat it, and it's definitely not afraid to get dark and serious. From the very beginning, when Alfred's family is unceremoniously killed off, we're told that life can be tough, but you can still make the best of it regardless. And throughout all of it, the series doesn't try to be like anything else. Although it's definitely a product of its time in terms of visuals and music, it is firmly its own entity, and all the better for it with its unusual story structure that, if nothing else, keeps you guessing at every turn. Sure, we've established by now that it's far from perfect, but the good outweighs the bad in a big way. And if nothing else, the show continues to be effective and memorable a good 20 years after its original release. And I'm incredibly glad I chose to watch it again after all this time. It is, in my humble opinion, a hidden gem, a forgotten classic, a dim star lost in the darkness of time, begging for the applause and adoration of others. Because, sadly, the show has become largely unknown and underappreciated nowadays, when I feel it should be celebrated and remembered. That was my whole incentive to make this retrospective and release my subtitle pack to begin with. To spread the word so a whole new audience could discover the show and hopefully enjoy it as much as me and the rest of my generation already has. But does the future hold anything in store for our lovable little duck? Well, it's hard to say. Since the show ended, there's been talks of a potential sequel series or movie, possibly starring Alfred and Winnie's son, but nothing has materialized in all of these years aside from a new stage musicals and audio plays on CD, which I have not checked out myself, so I cannot vouch for their quality. Plus, there's the added fact of them being released exclusively in Dutch and German, so it makes it hard for anyone not familiar with those languages to enjoy them. But if, like me, you enjoy the music from the show, I highly recommend checking out a fellow by the name of Korkane Totus on YouTube. He makes his own arrangements of numerous bits of background music from Alfred and Moomin, which I've gratefully made use of in my videos, and I absolutely adore his work and the effort he puts into it, so go check him out. And of course there's always Herman van Veen's original 2 albums from the show, although they are in Dutch, but the music still holds up very well. There's also another album called Rode Wangen, Rosy Cheeks, which is a collection of Herman's songs for children along with more Alfred music, and also Eric van der Werf's solo album which contains background tracks from the show along with several unrelated ones, but that last one's a bit tricky to find nowadays. Whatever the case, I hope you enjoyed my extended look back at one of my childhood favorites, which I will continue to enjoy time and again long after this, and I hope you will too. Remember, you can always check out the show yourself with the help of my subtitle pack. For now, thanks for watching the retrospective, and see you all out there somewhere. So that's it then. The retrospective is finally over and done with. We've come a long way, and in case you want to go back and watch it all over again, or if you somehow haven't seen it from the beginning, why not click the annotation for part 1 right there? Or if you're in the mood for something else, there's my video I did with Farrell the Gecko on the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Meanwhile, a big shout out and thank you to my latest patron and all-around cool guy, Ori Eftalion. If you want to be cool like him and get a shout out of your own in my next video, along with other rewards, feel free to go over to my Patreon and send a couple of bucks my way every month for every full video I make. Oh, and please subscribe to my channel too if you want to stay up to date on my new videos. Whatever the case, thanks for your support and stay frosty.